powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it's brought to you by Prop Swap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit, find out how. Go to PropSwap.com, download the Prop Swap app today. I'm Mike Gill. You're listening to the Sports Bash. This is Football at 4. He is Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast. And we've got a lot of Eagles today. Some breaking news earlier this morning as Brandon Brooks, the starting right guard for the last 6 seasons. Now, he hasn't played in all 6 seasons. Announced his retirement today, Adam. And I don't know if it was a surprise, but 32 years old, coming off that pectoral injury. He had the Achilles injury that kept him out all of last year. He said, my body just couldn't do it. I also thought he made an interesting point, is that the line's in good hands, so he felt that it's okay for me not to have to push it because he likes where they are. But Brooks retires.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I think he gets to go on his own terms. I understand he was under contract. He actually restructured his contract, which some teams will ask players to do if they know they're going to be gone. Now, I think we all would admit that we didn't expect him back anyway if he didn't retire because they were going to get younger. And Brandon, as you mentioned, he had the multiple Achilles injuries. Let's not forget, not just one over the years. It was actually 2. Pectoral and shoulder, as you discussed. Pretty significant pectoral injury. And now we got the answer because a lot of us want to know why wasn't he back? Because Lane Johnson said it was a partial, not full tear of the pectoral muscle, and he should have been back by then, but he didn't feel right physically, and he didn't want to push it. So, good for him to go on his own terms. The thing was interesting in that interview is I had no idea how good a relationship he had with the Philadelphia media. I mean, great, very approachable guy. I know that for a fact, but he referenced some of these guys. He thanked them. It was pretty good. It was very classy. I just thought he handled it well. A great Eagle. And let's face it, they would not have won the Super Bowl without him. He was that dominant. I mean, I know he said he was the best player at one point at guard in the National Football League. I mean, he mentioned in passing. I can't disagree with it. Talking to teams around the league, they always valued him as a dominant player. But I would say this. If Jeff Stoutland is not coaching, I don't think he becomes that great. And quite frankly, as you hear him talk about him, Mike, today, Stoutland, as he called him Jeffrey Stoutland a couple times, by the way, I would say it's obvious Stoutland took him to another level. Yeah,
I think he actually indicated that. He said, Stoutland watched my tape from Houston and said, you got to move your hands in and, boom. He really credited, if you look at his career, in Houston, he was a good player. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler after coming here from Houston and routinely one of the highest graded guards in football. That's one of those free agent pickups that they nailed. It's unfortunate that the injuries, because, who knows what he would have been the last couple of seasons had he not gotten hurt. And people forget that he tore both Achilles and came back from the Achilles the first time and played at a high level.
Yeah, no doubt. He was a great free agent acquisition in 2016. It was to the point, if I recall correctly, I was working at ESPN then. I remember digging on this. There was not a ton of interest in him because he now, this might have been the time that he had anxiety. We didn't know what it was, but Houston did not want him back. And I never could figure out why. What was the issue? Because I'd heard he was a good player. And then, we would later learn what he was dealing with and his willingness to go on the record and talk about it. He and his close friend Lane Johnson also has his issue with it. And I commend him because this will help people when they go on the record with some personal issue that they're dealing with. It could help people look up to him. I'm sure there are hundreds of people look up to him who deal with anxiety. I have friends who deal with anxiety. It's a tough thing to deal with, and kudos to him to do that. And the other part about this is interesting. He said he's going to live in the area, and correct me if I'm wrong. Is he going to University of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, University of Penn for business.
Yeah, good for him, man. I think it's great.
Yeah, he talked about, he watched the 30 for 30 broke and that he doesn't want to become one of those people that loses all their money. So he's going to grad school to learn what to do with his money, and he says, I'm open to whatever there. That being said, Brandon Brooks retires. What does it mean for the offensive line? Do we need to think about going outside of the organization, or do they have the in-house options already here?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's going to be their next challenge. There's a couple things. I don't know if you know this. His agent, Brandon Brooks' agent, is Joe Panos, former Eagles offensive lineman. You might remember Joe from the late 90s. I think he might have been there right when Andy Reid came in and then he left, I think. But Joe has a lot of offensive linemen, and he's had Brandon through his entire career. So kudos to Joe. All right, so going forward, what does the offensive line look like without him, particularly obviously in the interior? Well, at right guard, they have a decision to make how they're going to kind of balance that out. Is it going to be are they going to give Nate Herbig a chance, who is also, by the way, a restricted free agent? Are they going to give Jack Anderson, who was a good story, but they actually were very high on Jack Anderson, who they got from Buffalo, Buffalo's practice squad. He was a 7th rounder. But the big one is Jack Driscoll, who was another Jeff Stoutland find, a guy that really looked good, but he's been hurt the last 2 seasons. The good thing with the Eagles' situation is they have so much depth, young players to take a look at. That's not the problem. The problem is it's sticking with 2 guys and letting maybe they compete. No, it's not, Mike, that they won't draft somebody. I'm sure they will, but they're not barren. And at left guard, they've got Seumalo comes back, Landon Dickerson, and then the decision with Jason Kelsey. What are they going to do with him? Obviously, they'll want him back, and 2022 is the final year of his deal, on his restructured deal. It's technically not a restructure, but it was because they gave him a new deal, but had it structured a certain way to make it salary cap friendly. But he's got what we call a poison pill due in June, where they're not that he won't make a decision over the next couple of months, but they would have to have a new deal in place by June. He cannot play on that last year because there's a monster roster bonus which is put in to make both sides get to the table. So the great thing is they're in great shape here. Mailata signed long-term through 2025. Seumalo is on the last year of his deal at left guard. Will Dickerson be the center or left guard? Will Seumalo be the center or left guard? They're great. They're great there. Lane Johnson signed through 2025. They've got Dillard, Mike, to be the backup to Mailata, though he could be traded. LaRaven Clark signed a 1-year extension. He could back up a right or left tackle. Driscoll, who I mentioned. Owushka, they got from University of Buffalo. They just signed him to a 2-year. They re-signed him for 2 years. Brett Toth suffered a major knee injury. Toth said on IG he's out for 9 months. They got Suapeta as well, and Jack Anderson I mentioned. So, Mike, they will draft alignment. They don't really have to because I think right now they're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, now let's take a look at where they are around this offensive line, which is the strength of the team, and kind of give the listeners a little overview of this roster, where they are, and what it sets up for the offseason. I think the Brooks retiring and the restructuring gave them another $12 million in cap space. Adam, that's going to put them around $55 million of cap space, I think, is the number for this offseason. So I would imagine the quarterback position, you're not spending a lot of money there.
Yeah, so the cap numbers, be careful what you see out there. Some of it's not correct, we were told. So let's put it this way, folks. It'll be business as usual for the Eagles under the cap. Last year it was not because of the Wentz trade and the dead money that accelerated immediately. They can do whatever they want this offseason. Don't worry about what the number is. And by the way, that number will go up. It'll probably wind up going up because there'll be some other decisions they'll have to make with contracts. And then also they could we'll get to defense in a second, but they could also extend Hargrave's contract, lowers cap number. And then the Fletcher Cox decision, that one's fascinating on what they're going to do there. And that obviously would hurt the cap for dead money. But there's other things they could do to clear up cap space if they wanted to, not that they need to. So they're going to be in great shape, folks. You don't have to worry about it. We're back to when we first started the show. We explained to people in 2018 when Jeff and I started this in spring with our friend Billy Osborne that don't worry about the cap. It's not going to be a problem. People talk way too much about it. It's such a minor issue these days with the TV money, but the Wentz situation threw it into a loop, but they're back to normal. So, I think offensive line, as I said, they're great at left tackle. They're great at the guard spots. Brooks retiring. Yeah, he's great when he plays, but he wasn't playing enough, but great Eagle. But they've got so many developmental players. They're in really good shape. The issues on offense would be, quarterback, everybody knows right now, based on what happened last week, you and I talked about it Friday, that they've made it clear that Hurts is their starter for now for 22. This will be his 3rd year. Minshew's the backup for now. The only issue is at running back where, Miles Sanders, this is his last year. Do they extend him or not? I doubt they would. It's an opinion. I haven't asked them yet. But knowing the way they think, they don't typically extend contracts of injured players. So I do believe they'll add another running back to the mix. The only 3 running backs under contract are Sanders, Gainwell, and Huntley. Huntley's When they signed him off the practice squad, they gave him an extra year through 23, but he's on a prove-it deal. Kenny Gainwell right now is going to be heavily involved. His role should grow. He's got 3 more years left on his deal. Wide receivers, Mosher and I did our offensive preview, Mike. It's a nightmare, that position. Other than Devontae Smith and Watkins, who Nick Sirianni thinks he could be the best number 2 receiver he's ever coached. That's a very strong statement. I mean, the guy's coached in Indy, Philly, Kansas City. I got to go through his list, but that's a pretty bold statement. I still think he's a 3rd receiver, not a 2nd. But the only sure thing in terms of production is Devontae Smith. Rager has an uncertain future. Whiteside, he's on the fine Avers deal. He's just a guy. We know he's a blocker. That doesn't even count. They need to add 2 significant pieces to receiver. Goddard's the starter. Stoll's the backup. Richard Rodgers, by the way, they did re-sign him for a year. Tyree Jackson's coming off an ACL injury, and Togiai is there. They need to add one more guy to compete for that number 2 job. I think the biggest issue for me is whether they bring in competition for Hurts or not. We don't have that answer yet, and they have to do something significant. Receiver DJ Chark's a guy I've always been a favorite of. Yeah. He's with the Jaguars. I know the Eagles were very high on him for the 18th draft. In fact, if I recall correctly, he was one of the 3 guys they were looking at in the 2nd round. So he's a guy we'll be talking about when we get closer to free agency.
Yeah, and the one thing is they have money, as you chronicled, and wide receiver is a area this season in free agency that does have some depth and some intriguing names. So that could be one area where they make a play in free agency. I don't know if they go Devontae Adams level, but they could be involved with some of the wide receiver free agents.
100%, they will. You could count on that. We had a report 2 years ago we had a combine report that the Eagles were not going to be invested in veteran receivers. And I don't remember what they did. They did something minor. They didn't really spend any money on it. This time it's different. They're going to have the cap space to do it. You have an owner who's willing to spend the cash versus more important owners. Owners don't care about cap. They care about cash. I learned that the hard way when I first started covering the league. I didn't know that owners didn't care about the cap. They only care about money allocation. Team presidents care about cash allocation. And the GMs have to work around the cap space. So they'll do that. They'll add 2 pieces, at least one for free agency, one for the draft. How high that player is in the draft remains to be seen. We're several months away from that, obviously. But it's really where defense, where Mike, they have so many needs. Yeah. Jeff and I dropped this show this morning. The great thing about these offensive defensive series is you really do a deep dive and understand how far away they are at certain positions. Everybody knows at linebacker they're barren, but they don't have any depth at the end. I mean, they really don't. When I say only, they don't have much. I mean, Derek Barnett's up, Kerrigan's up, Brandon Graham's coming off an Achilles. Yeah, this is his last year, by the way. They said he's coming back. Great. Sweat. The only thing I know is Sweat's a starter. We don't know how many snaps Brandon Graham could handle. Teron Jackson showed some upside, but you don't know how many plays he can handle. Malvo's back, the kid that they found who flashed a little bit, but he's sort of an unknown. So, Mike, they have a lot of questions here. There's no question about it. Linebacker, Edwards will start. And the other thing is, by the way, if John Gannon gets the Texans job, well, then the scheme could change. We don't know yet.
Right.
We'll have to see about that. And corner, they don't have any. They have Slay, who's signed through 23. Max is signed through 24. They need Steven Nelson's up. They don't have a number 2 corner. They don't know if McPherson's going to be their number 3 corner on the outside. They don't have any starting safeties right now. They're both unsigned. I love Marcus Epso. He's been a good story. You would think he'd be a starter, but it's not guaranteed. So, Mike, they've got a lot of work to do on defense.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, you mentioned they have Edwards and Taylor signed. I mean, do they go in and saying we're happy enough with those 2 guys to have them at the top of our depth chart again? Taylor, you started to like, and then you didn't see him again. Yeah. Edwards seems like he is the guy that they just want to be the next guy. So are they looking to replace both of them?
They need to get size at linebacker. They're too small. We saw that over time. I know the run defense improved after a very bad start. They need to get bigger there. And remember, Alex Singleton's a restricted free agent. Jernard Avery, who was kind of a surprise, did do a bad job on his role, but you would expect more from him as a pass rusher. His contract's up. They just don't know. Right now, Jacoby Stevens got re-signed after he was released. He went after he passed the waivers. He went to the practice squad. They re-signed him for 2 years. Sean Bradley's only a special teamer. Patrick Johnson is a strong side linebacker. It's a little pass rush in him. He signed through 24, and Christian Ellis, Luther Ellis' son, is back for 2 years. But all these guys are just backups. They're not guys you ever really want on the field a lot.
Yeah.
So they have significant questions on defense. Folks.
And you
they're
mentioned
far away.
And you mentioned both McLeod and Harris. I mean, they both were the starters and got most of the snaps last year. They're both in their 30s. So even if you say, hey, we need to bring someone back, you're probably not getting the guy at the same level as he was even the year before.
Good point. Right. So, Mike, they've got a ton of work to do. They've got 10 draft picks. If they probably will have more heading into the draft based on compensatory. I don't know how many they could get. I haven't asked yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if they got one or two. But even if they only have 10, you know that they're going to have more because you never say never. But I just find it hard to believe that they would keep all 3 first-round picks and not trade down to get an extra pick for 23, or just because they're not. It's unlikely that they would take a quarterback that early, based on A, what they said, and B, I just don't get the feeling this draft there's that guy you have to have. I just don't. And that may be, Mike. You and I didn't really talk about this much last week when we were together on your show. Actually, no, wait. We did. Did we do the spot last Wednesday? So maybe we didn't talk. Did we talk about? Oh no, we did talk. They talked last Wednesday. But what we didn't really get into is that how the league sees this drafted quarterback. It's not very good on paper. Mm-hmm. Sure, there'll be some stars over the years who we didn't think would be stars, but just on paper, we've been running opinions from around the league. This is not a draft you need to get a quarterback in the first round for.
Oh, I totally agree with that. That's why people come after me on Twitter a lot because I said I'm okay rolling with Hurts for another year and build the roster up around him. That doesn't mean I'm married to Hurts long term. I just don't like the options in this draft. Now, if you told me I was going to make a trade for an established veteran, I'm open to listen to what that deal is. I'm just talking about I'm not using my draft capital for one of these particular quarterbacks.
Right, and the thing is, they need so much help.
Yes,
they have so many holes. I mean, we'll do this closer to the draft of I know Andrew Jacheco, by the way, did a great mock draft. You can see it today on InsideTheBirds.com. Check it out. They're in a spot where they're going to have to do a lot in the draft because they have so many holes. We just went over a lot of them very quickly, so it's going to be fun. And it starts in free agency the third week of March. And by the way, when I come to you next week, I'll either be on Wednesday from the Senior Bowl calling in, or I'll do Friday. I may have to switch. I'm not sure yet. Mm-hmm. But I will have information for you from the Senior Bowl that you can be rest assured.
Oh, this is my time of the year, man. I know Jacheco and I are like having Christmas Day whenever he joins us talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, he'll love that. I know. In fact, I met Andrew at the East-West Shrine game 2 or 3 years ago. It was kind of cool. We were you know what's unbelievable about that? East-West Shrine that got moved to Las Vegas. We were literally the only media people there. It was shocking. I loved it. It was in Tampa. They used to hold it. The first couple of days of practices would be in the Rays Stadium, the Tin Can. What's that place called? Oh, Tropicana Dome.
Yeah.
That place is a dump, but it moved to Las Vegas.
Hey, real quick before we roll here, Milton Williams. I talked to Anthony Becht. He does the Tampa games, and he did some Eagles games.
Good friend of mine.
Yeah. We went to college together, so we text back and forth a lot. And the one guy, because he did the Eagles-Cowboys game on Saturday night. He had to call that game on radio for Westwood One.
Nice.
So, nobody's in the game. And then the next week, the Eagles play Tampa. So we had him on the radio 2 consecutive weeks. And I said, what did you take from that whole Dallas mess? He said, Milton Williams was the one guy that jumped off the field for me. Is he someone who's a rotational player? Is he someone they think is going to have a bigger role in the defense moving forward?
It's funny. I'll give you a nugget here. So I'm holding this, but I will just give you a little bit of a intel here. So I actually asked that question like 5 weeks ago to a front office source of the Eagles. I said, this guy's just showing up every week. Do you see him as a starter rotational guy? And this source said, listen, he's a player. We already know that because we're seeing him do it, and he's so far ahead of where they thought as a third-round pick early on. You don't typically see third-rounders playing this much. Plus, he had some challenges. He came from a low level of college football. He had shorter arms. There were some concerns with him, but you love his motor, and they're trying to figure that out because I do believe this will play into whether they traded Fletcher Cox or not. Because they love Milton Williams. Like, he is so far ahead of where they thought he'd be year one, and he's only going to get better, you would think. and they don't have any depth. I mean, if they trade Cox, Milt Williams is up. They brought back Marvin Wilson, who was a UDFA last year, who never played for them really, and Tui Pelotu really never played a 6th rounder out of USC. Ridgeway's contract's up, so Mike. Milt Williams may be starting. I don't know if they know that he's ready yet, but he might be.
No,
they will obviously address this in the draft again.
He is the infamous video of Roseman trying to give the fist pound to Tom Donahue, and he was like, not really interested in that. And both those players turned out to be pretty good. The guy that was drafted in Detroit is
Tom
pretty
Donahoe
good.
is the greatest, by the way, really a Hall of Fame personnel guy, and he ran Steelers personnel for many years, and then with Buffalo. But, yeah, he's a confidant of Howie Roseman's, and that video got out. Good for Roseman not to discipline him because, look, it gets out and everybody knew what happened, but they handled it in-house. And right now that looks like a great pick, but we'll see. It's only 1 year.
All right, Adam Caplan, at Caplan NFL, the Inside the Birds podcast, off-season edition. Obviously, free agency, draft, and everything that's going on. The games this weekend going to be fantastic. The Bengals are here against the Chiefs. We'll have that game on 97.3. And, of course, the NFC West battle between the Niners and the Rams. We'll have all that here on 97.3. Adam, Football at 4, another great edition. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
That's Adam Caplan from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast.